The paper reports that two of the male prostitutes were given a late-night tour of the White House last year.
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers.
I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Nick Bryant podcast. Today, my guest is psychologist Ellen Lacter, and we're going to talk about mind control. Ellen, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you, Nick. Glad to be here.
Could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Okay, yeah. I majored in art in college, and then I had to decide whether to be a therapist or an artist. And I picked becoming an art therapist. And then I worked in a day treatment program in New Jersey and went to a psychoanalytic institute, but I couldn't become a psychoanalyst with my art therapy degree. So I moved to California and got my PhD in clinical psychology. And then I worked in a community clinic for a while, and then shortly after that went into private practice by 1986. And I became a registered play therapist and supervisor, worked a lot with abused children, and like half kids and half adults. And through that work, I eventually learned about ritualistic abuse and other extreme abuse and dissociative disorders and dissociative identity disorder, and developed expertise in those areas, as well as torture-based mind control, which is what's used in ritualistic abuse and other extreme abuse to control victims long-term, lifelong is their goal. And I've become published in those areas, and I'm also an activist on behalf of victims of extreme abuse, and I have a website where I try to educate the public and to help survivors, and it's called www.endritualabuse.org.
And you were one of the first people I called when I descended into the Franklin vortex, and I was trying to understand things like ritual abuse and mind control, because those were components of the Franklin scandal. And at least some of the victims said that they had been exposed to ritual abuse. And also one said that he had been exposed to mind control. But then a woman who I interviewed, who was also a victim, started having memories of that. I'd say about 7 or 8 years ago. She called it that she was a science experiment, she was someone's science experiment.
Okay, yeah.
So how did you learn about ritual abuse and mind control?
Well, I have been working a lot with abused children and adults, and I had my first case in 1994. The mother did not tell me that the kids had been ritually abused. I met with her. I took a general history. She did not share the ritualistic elements, but then after I met her kids, and they did some very disturbing things in the playroom that I had never seen before, which I'm going to leave out to maintain confidentiality. I brought the mother in alone in the next meeting, and I said, I'm wondering if this is ritual abuse. And she said to me, well, that's what I think, but I didn't want to influence you, which is sort of funny because the False Memory Syndrome Foundation had already been talking about how therapists influence clients to believe that they were ritually abused or that children were ritually abused. And in this case, the mother was trying to be careful not to influence me, and I came up with it on my own, as did she. So yeah, did you have a question?
No, it's kind of interesting. There was a book called Chaos, which has been, it's an amazing read. And the author goes in to talk about Jolly West, who was a member on the scientific board of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. And in the book, he's saying that he has the ability to implant memories. He was a psychiatrist. And according to his stance on the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, therapists implanted memories.
I think it's interesting that the False Memory Syndrome Foundation is saying that we therapists implant all these memories simply by, listening to our clients and listening to their symptoms and asking pretty open-ended questions. And well, they would suggest that we ask leading questions, which we have no interest in asking leading questions. But anyway, but the irony is that the abuser groups do implant memories, but they do it using very systematic methods like covert hypnosis or making people suggestible through other means like drugs or torture, and then making them believe things like they'll do, for instance, a pseudo surgery where they make a victim believe that they put a microchip in their head, and maybe they'll have a mirror and they'll actually make a cut and there'll be some blood, and the abusers will be dressed in surgical scrubs, and the victim will come to believe, or that personality who was in executive control at that time will come to believe that they do have a microchip in their head and that it can read their thoughts, and that the abusers now know everything they're thinking and every thought that they have potentially of defying the directives of the group. So yes, memories can be implanted, but it takes quite a lot of very calculated and systematic methods, illusions, tricks, mirrors, film, all kinds of stuff. So a lot of people on the False Memory Syndrome Foundation were found to be connected to the MK Ultra program, and here they are accusing therapists of implanting memories of abuse, which is quite hard to do. If you want to implant memories, you've got to do some pretty cruel and strategic abuse.
Well, Jolly West and some other people on the False Memory Syndrome Scientific Board actually conducted CIA mind control experiments. So they were definitely covering up their tracks with the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. I think the False Memory Syndrome Foundation had a number of different people that were coming from a number of different areas. There were some very affluent people that were accused of molesting their children, and they were part of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. And the Amazing Randy, which kind of surprised me initially because he does look like kind of a freak, but I've also been told that he is a pederast. So maybe that's what he was doing on the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. The Amazing Randy was a magician.
Right. And then, Ralph Underwager, one of the founders, was later revealed some of his true colors, talking about, what was it, the magazine Padika? I can't remember if it was in Sweden or the Netherlands, saying
Netherlands pedophile magazine, yes.
Yeah, saying, he thought it was just fine for men and boys, and he wasn't talking about 18-year-olds to have sexual relationships. And they got rid of him from the False Memory Syndrome Foundation.
Well, and he was one of the founders.
Yes.
And actually, he said that child abuse was God's will.
Okay.
And also, he did say that 70% of women who had been abused as minors found that the experience was beneficial. So Ralph had a lot of problems that didn't sync with the population. And
that didn't look good for the
that did not look good for the false marriage. So that was the end of Ralph, but they found a number of replacements for him. So the False Memory Syndrome Foundation need not fret. So what is your current understanding of mind control based on?
Well, let me tell you a little bit about what happened with that first case. So in the first case, a woman, I'll use the pseudonym Julie, she looked at a photo lineup of the alleged abusers and the children in that case, and she identified everybody in the photo lineup except one very, very young person who she did not falsely pick anybody on that page, but she did not recognize that child. So that was pretty alarming to me. I did believe the kids and everything that they told me and everything that they played about and drew about. So it wasn't as if I had questioned them, but when an adult survivor corroborated their abuse in a photo lineup, it was, kind of takes your breath away and really wakes you up that this is pretty bad. It corroborated both cases. So she corroborated the children's case, and the fact that she recognized them corroborated her case. And so that really was, me being thrown into the deep end of the pool as far as understanding that ritual abuse is a reality. There was no way anybody could argue me out of that after that experience. Then the person, Julie, who was not my client, I ended up getting corroboration from her of very complicated mind control. So an expert in mind control had shared with me a very lengthy alphanumeric code that was used for a particular purpose by a particular organization that uses mind control. And this woman,
Was that organization affiliated with the government, or?
I'll go that far and no further.
Okay.
Yes. And so, and then in Julie's work on her abuse and trying to overcome her mind control, she was able to share with her therapist that same alphanumeric code, which I then received and saw it was the same one that this expert had provided to me. So that was very disturbing because it was not in Julie's conscious memory. It was something that she got when she worked with her personalities. And the fact that it's not on the internet, that expert who shared it with me did not share it broadly. I really don't know if he shared it with anybody else except the people he worked with. And here she is saying the same code, which actually worked for the purpose it was intended to work for with Julie. So then, and I'm being a little vague, to protect confidentiality, protect all the parties involved. But that was very alarming because now I had evidence that a government agency was using very complicated strategies to control people and to control their mind, and that it actually worked. And that's when I entered my secondary post-traumatic stress disorder myself. I mean, I was functioning, except I was devastated because now I knew about ritual abuse as a reality and about our own government's use of mind control on victims beginning in childhood. And that was a very hard thing to stomach. I was raised in a pretty sheltered way. Nobody I knew as a kid was abused, not in any significant way. Maybe parents who said a couple of nasty things sometimes, but to discover that level of abuse, I was very frightened, and that was a big adjustment, which all therapists have to go through when they learn about this work. We have to be basically thrown into having some vicarious traumatization and have to adjust and change our view of the world. I know you've had to do that, Nick.
With the Franklin scandal, I was devastated when I realized that the Franklin scandal was a reality. It was totally devastating to me that my government would, or some malignant corner of my government would take part in the abuse of children. That was, I just found that utterly devastating.
Right. It's like, but luckily you're the kind of person who, when you learn something like that,